don't get overwhelmed thinking about writing the book. Think about an outline. Think about your team. And, step one in my process is build a team. So, that works for this is, okay, who's your team going to be? Because you don't want it to just be you. If you've ever done it before, it's not going to be just you. Who's your team? I had my sister, some family, scribe. So, okay, I got my team. My step two is educate the team. In this case, the team was educate me. So it was a little different. And then work on, the problem statement is create your problem statement is step three. In this case, it was the outline. Just take a month, take however long you need the outline, because writing the outline really kind of forces you to go, you keep revisiting and going back, to find things. And it just winds up being a much fuller outline if you give it the time it deserves.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for making the time and joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
By way of introducing the book, why don't you introduce yourself and just start with a little bit of background, the lead up to the initial decision to write this?
You bet. Thanks. So, as I say in the book, I'll start at birth. I'll give you the short version, but I'm starting at birth. Basically, I was always referred to as how come Sholler. I had to know. Anytime someone, tried to propose a fact to me, I'd say, how come? How come? It drove my mother absolutely crazy. And that kind of carried through, high school, college, into the workplace. And it evolved into organizing things. I found that if I organized things and tried to sit back without an emotional take on things and just kind of put all the cards on the table, that I could get to the how come much faster. Mm-hmm. And that kind of evolved into this, the brand I had at Fidelity, where I was for 27 years as the fixer. When things broke, didn't matter if I had experience in it or not, they would pull me over and say, this isn't working. We need you to fix it. And the approach, started from the beginning. It refined over time, which is what's in the book. But over time, it basically became, okay, let's lay this out and figure out how come. And that's kind of what, just how my brain has always worked.
It seems in like reading your bio and background and everything, you're like a real life fixer. Like your job is just fix problems, figure things out. Can you give me a little more, like what are the most common things, or what are some of the bigger problems you've solved? Like, this sounds like a very fascinating, almost like, the wolf who shows up, but I assume it's not quite that dramatic.
No, I mean, it was, it was just something that I enjoyed doing. And it usually was first more in the tech space, where I wasn't a developer, but I was frequently doing either project management or managing IT resources, managing developers. Mm-hmm. And it started in a frustration of wasted time and inefficiency. And it just amazed me to think that for all the brilliant technologists that Fidelity had, you realize that in school, they're really not trained in formal problem solving. They might be analytical, but that's more from an engineering degree. And it just was born out of frustration of seeing the time people were wasting. So I would start to kind of casually dig in, had to earn the respect of people much more technological than me, and really just start to, figure out how to poke and prod and ask some questions. And eventually you develop a reputation when something they've been working on for 3 days, you come in and after 30 minutes of discussing it, they have a solution, which started at kind of dismissing me like, oh, what do you know about this? And 30 minutes later, it's like, son of a gun, we figured this out. And, so I just started to formalize it more and more over time. And I started to see, the more I formalized it, the more I saw that there were applications, not just in technology, but across process, across people, just dealing with human resource issues. So I'll give you a kind of an issue that crosses all three, which is one of my favorite. So you asked for an example. So there's what I refer to as the Ned said issue. So Ned Johnson was, the founder, basically creator, brilliant man of most of what Fidelity is known for. And we had the situation where I was brought into this meeting because we were going on weeks of people trying to solve this problem where apparently Ned said that he wanted a specific page to be the default lockdown homepage for all of Fidelity employees. That was fine with most companies, but the company that was retail, which has 7,000 phone reps at the time, and they use a web-based application to do their job, said, absolutely not. They are literally all their training, everything has them, finishing, hitting home, which takes them, their homepage is the application for retail, not some welcome to, Fidelity today, here's the news for the day type of page. So they brought me in to say, you got to fix this. We're at a stalemate. No one can figure out what to do. So I walked in and I said, okay, what's the challenge? Well, Ned said this has to be the lockdown homepage. So I said, okay, hold on. And they were all starting to argue after that. I said, hold on, time out. Does anyone have the memo or the email or anything from Ned so I can see the request in writing? Because anything you say up until you have demonstrable proof is a proposed fact. I needed to see the actual fact. So all these proposals are interesting, but where's the fact? So someone had to do some digging and they went back and eventually found from Ned, the request was actually, we would like to know that I want to know that every employee sees this homepage at least once a day. So I've been in this room, this meeting for about 3 minutes at this point. And I said, okay, so retail, would you be willing to use a registry setting to have this page come up as the homepage so that they see it first thing and then they click home and they're back to where they are today. They just continue to do the job, but they will see that page. And retail said, yeah, absolutely. So I said, okay. Been nice.
I'll send you my bill. Yeah.
I'll send the bill. And I mean, that was often, when you just, it's amazing. I tell people anywhere between 70 and 90% of problems are solved actually in the stage of verifying the facts, not even problem resolution, but verifying the facts. And that's what solves so many problems like that. So.
That's really interesting. It's I've spent a lot of time studying Elon Musk, and he's, of course, has the algorithm, and the first step of the algorithm is make your requirements less dumb. And so I definitely see the rhyme of when you closely examine the problem, it may not even exist, really.
Exactly. I've been reading the book of Elon. I'm about halfway through it, and that was the first thing that resonated with me. I was like, yes, exactly.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. That's very cool. Very cool. Thank you. So when did this become like you've been a curious and an organizing person your whole life. When did it become like a formalized process for you? Because that's what really the book is. The book is like your process that you run each time now that gives you this superpower. I imagine it was sort of an organic evolution. Is that how it unfolded?
That's exactly right. There was organic up to aha moment. The organic was, 20 or maybe, about 15 or so years at Fidelity. And then, but it was always just still like something I do at work. I never really thought about how powerful it was. It was just, if anything, I was kind of glad that I had a thing that's going to keep me at Fidelity. I'm going to survive here because I got a thing, and I actually did training to show other people because I didn't want it to just be mine. I wanted other people to see the benefit. And really my war was on the inefficiencies of problem solving. So I wanted to kind of train minions, but it was still just kind of a thing, a way I did things. In 2000, the aha moment happened, which is my wife had been, as I talk in chapter 7 of the book, my wife was dealing with a very, very rare bleeding disorder for 13 years. Her doctors were the head of hematology at the Dana-Farber and Brigham and Women's in Boston, like two of the best hematologists in the world. And they could not 13 years, they couldn't figure out what it was.
Wow.
So finally, one night they gave her an ill-advised plasma transfusion, which caused her to flatline. And they fortunately resuscitated her. And I came in the next morning and I said, so, you killed her last night. Fortunately, you brought her back. So, now what do we do? And they said, well, we're going to test for factor 13, which is hemophilia. And the aha moment hit me like a brick on the head. they're trained in diagnosis, not problem solving. And I think it was the organic growth of it and finally having the confidence that, wait a sec, I know how to do this better than they do. They're doctors, but they don't know how to problem solve. So I said, guys, I need a whiteboard and a marker, and I'm taking over. And they said, sure. And they got me a whiteboard, got me a marker. And the title of the book comes from the fact that after 13 years of failure, 7 minutes into the discussion, we had a diagnosis. And that's really when I realized, all right, this process works. At some point when I leave Fidelity, I need to document this. I have to write this down for my own good and for others.
Yeah. Well, impossible not to ask what happened in those 7 minutes.
So it was exactly the process that I go through in the book. So build the first step is, build a team, train the team, just to gain some credibility, explain to them how the process is going to work, state the problem. So we clearly stated the problem. Then you just go through, you draw a T structure and you list the facts and the questions. So the facts that we had were that she had surgery or major blunt trauma, like a ski accident, on these certain dates that she had listed. And she had meticulous records. Then on the right, we listed, next to each of those dates, we listed when she had massive internal hemorrhaging, which was her bleed, not external, it's only internal massive hemorrhaging. And I said, okay, these are all facts. Then you always have to go back and confirm, do all your experts agree to these facts? Yep, we agree. So then I said, okay, now we'll do math. Math is an acceptable fact. The difference between every one of these dates is 2.5 to 3 months. So now we get to the question part. You keep testing for hemophilia, which is a month 1 issue. When you bleed, you have to clot. We have nothing that indicates that she has a clotting problem. There is no sense to spend more than 7 seconds on a clotting problem. So here's a question, and I wrote up on the whiteboard, what happens in month 3 of the clotting process, or the healing process? And they said, well, so we're 4 minutes into the discussion now. And they said, well, in month 3, you have to dissolve the clot. And if you don't, your body you'll have massive clotting, you'll have strokes, you have risks of clots going to your lungs and things like that. So I said, okay, for the record, we're about 4 minutes in, and this is the first time in 13 years that anyone has ever mentioned the word dissolving to me. Just thought I'd put that out there. So then I erased everything and I said, new fact, in month 3, the body has to dissolve the clot. So now my questions. What does the body need? And again, I'm not a medical professional, so I don't enzymes, proteins, sugars. What does the body produce to dissolve a clot? And they said, well, you produce plasminogen activator, which is PA, and plasminogen activator inhibitor, which is PAI1. And at that point, to shorten the version, they said, at this point, you're beyond what we know. You need to go speak to this expert in Michigan who discovered all of this. A little bit of luck plays into problem solving too. This gentleman interned under them in Boston, and that's why they're familiar with his work. So they sent us out to him. We met him, and he was able to diagnose that my wife has a plasminogen activator inhibitor deficiency, which is only known to exist in the Amish and the Mennonites. And her family were Germans that fled to Switzerland, to the town of Tammans, converted to be Mennonites for 1 or 2 generations. The genetic mutation started in the town of Tammans, where her family lived. Then they moved to the U.S., converted to Christianity, and went on. But sadly, genes don't care what religion you are. So
wow.
Yeah. And it is manageable, not treatable. In other words, you can't eliminate it. But when it happens, she takes a certain amount of pills, and it has been a complete non-event. Her medical bills in 2000 were over $1 million, and it is now a complete non-event.
Wow. And like no ongoing, no change of sort of life expectancy or anything like that.
So
Unbelievable.
every year I continue to research in AI to see what new discoveries there are.
Yeah.
And it's funny you ask that, because the most recent research actually potentially, it's hard to research because it's so rare. I mean, like 8
Sure.
people at any given time have it, but just logically, they're starting to link it to increased longevity because it prevents clotting, which in older years can actually be a major problem.
Oh, which
So,
causes, strokes and
yeah, exactly.
yeah. Wow.
So if anything, it's actually linked to, it might turn out to be her superpower. And I mean, we went through
Yeah.
being blamed for doing this. The stories I put in the book, chapter 7, I put chapter 7 in, which is very personal, but I wanted it to be the compelling chapter that makes people say, holy crap, there's this, it was okay up until now. Like, yeah, maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't, but holy crap, this, like, I know someone who has a medical issue. I want those people using this to help them.
Yeah. Well, if I was your editor, I'd say make that chapter 1, but that ship has sailed a few years ago. The general rule of thumb to just, open with your best, open with your hit, your biggest song. Don't make them wait for chapter 7 for the good stuff. But
Don't bury the lead.
that's for anybody listening who's writing a book now. Not, if you've already written your book, just ignore me. Interesting. Okay. So thank you for explaining that and telling that story, and kudos to you for putting in the personal hard thing, because that is what really hits home, and that's what makes this.
Absolutely.
When someone has an issue like this, makes this the most important book they can possibly read, and that's a powerful place for a book to occupy, and a method like this can change lives. And good on you for going so far out of your way to and investing in putting it out into the world. It casts. I'm casting into sharp relief my inability to solve problems at the moment. And I'm like, yeah, it is really fascinating how, given that it's all we do is basically wake up and deal with problems every day. The fact that it's never part of any curriculum, it's not just a medical school problem. It's an everything problem. We should be being trained in problem solving techniques since we're 5 years old, but doesn't happen. I've yet to attend that class.
I've always said, if you want to choose a marketplace that will never expire, will never be outdated, solving problems, the universe just continues to throw them at us every day.
Yeah. David Deutsch has 2 kind of etched in stone maxims, which are problems are inevitable and problems are solvable. Like it's, there's a great piece that comes with that as your personal mantra. It's like, don't be mad at the problem. There's always going to be a problem, but the good news is, you'll solve it, or at least it's solvable.
Well, and that's, what part of what having the confidence so the book really forced me to put the process in place, test it. I actually went back to work afterward. I thought I was retired, but I went back to work. Because after writing the book, it was not only cathartic, but it kind of had me, pumping to go back to work and prove that it actually works. And that's a big thing when you have confidence that you can solve problems. You don't fear anything. We do all kinds of things in life, and people say, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And I always laugh and I go, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't lose sleep over what if. Why would you worry about what if you can deal with everything?
Yeah. The next problem is solvable. Tell me about the writing process, because this is an interesting one in that it was such an organic evolution. And I imagine it's very difficult to put something that's so intuitive and organic down. That translation into black and white is sometimes very challenging.
Absolutely. I mean, the quintessential plug for Scribe here is, I could not have done it. There's just no way. I had some good advisors. My sister, God bless her, was just, absolutely critical. She was the one who gave me the first feedback. You read the first draft and said, are you writing a memoir or do you want to train people? And I said, no, it's not a memoir. And she goes, all right, we have to start over. So that, then I worked with Scribe, and the editors and the advisors, everything was invaluable. One of the key things that you think about, and I've seen people mention it in other of your other hour podcasts, is the champagne moment. When they tell you it's not in terms of dollars, it's not in terms of book sales, what makes you jump up and down? And for me, it was easy. to answer. I have to write this book. And the thing that will make me jump up and down is the first person who contacts me to say, hey, I read your book and it helped us solve this major medical issue. And I'm happy to say I've actually had that happen with someone who saved their father-in-law's life.
Wow.
As a married male to pull the card out where you save your father-in-law's life, you're golden after that. You can't do better than that.
Yeah,
And
you're looking forward to Thanksgiving at that point. This is,
exactly. So that was,
toast to me again? Okay, fine.
So that was really just helping me, the book process. It was everything. It was not only writing, which I'm not a writer, it was putting me into an area I'm uncomfortable doing, which I wanted to do. I wanted to challenge myself to do something I've never done before. And it really helped me. That part became actually less of a challenge than the challenge of, can I remember everything that I did with this and how I did it and all the tricks? And, that became the hard part. The writing part with you guys helping me, it was easy.
Fantastic. That's not everybody's story, but I'm glad to hear it. And that is, our big mission is to just remove the friction, like unlock the books that are in so many heads like yours after an incredible career and all of this, important information obtained. Because I'm sure a lot of what you learned, you picked up by reading the books that, people had written before you. And so just contributing back to that pool is, I think a moral duty, actually.
Absolutely. There were things that my editor suggested, here at the end of this chapter, you kind of want to recap it. That was the biggest thing for me was the recap, because I'm verbose when I speak, but when I write, I write nothing. And so it seems redundant to me to recap. So I took her advice. I do this kind of recap. Then I step away for, a day. I go back and read it and I'm like, wow, this is really good. I'm so glad I did that because it's really good.
Yeah. It's a good feeling when your present self is proud of your past self's work. It doesn't always go that way, but that's a good sign that you're making progress. You mentioned the champagne moment, and that's as noble of one as I've ever heard. Were there any other, surprises or just unexpected good things that have come as a result of this book being out there? As we record this, we're a little more than 4 years out for launch. For context, the book's incredibly well reviewed, but I hope you've had some good instances that have come from readers.
So yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things for me was the using it as I said, I finished it. I had to go back to work now. So, I go back to work and I mentioned the book in the interview process. I can't say it got me the job, but it definitely helped. But that wasn't really the biggest part. I thought that would be the biggest part. Like, wow, the book, helped me get the job. But then I started to work and it was to build a problem management team and put the process in place. So I had the team read the book, I did the training based on the book, and I never really thought about kind of the author credential that comes with that, and I'm not comfortable because I was never a writer saying, well, I'm an author, I wrote a book. Yeah. It was more, very kind of casual, I'm so passionate about this. I wrote this book. You might want to take a look at it. And people would come back in and they'd be like, oh my God, so how are we? And now they're looking at me to say, so you tell us, how are we implementing this? What are we going to do? This is great. What do we do? So to be able to, to write it, put it down, and then to be able to use that to, as a leverage to go forward and build credibility was, I just had not really even thought about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting as you describe that. I'm also thinking about how it's kind of it breaks up this like potential ego logjam. When you're sitting there, when you're telling somebody what to do or how it's supposed to be done, there's that kind of weird like hierarchical thing. I hate telling people what to do. I don't like it. And when you have the ability to just sort of hand them a book or refer them to a book, you're like, look, I wrote everything I know down. All my experiences, all my stories, all my frameworks. It's in this book. They can kind of go off on their own and make it their own, and sort of come back and say, I agree with this framework. I want to implement it. But there's not this sense of like, sit down. I'm going to tell you how it is. We're going to do it my way. It's like, look, I put it in writing. I put it in black and white, and we can have a discussion about this object, this, what's down there, sort of you and me together against this. which is also a thing Rick Rubin talks about. He's like, I don't want to talk about your creative ideas. I want to hear the thing that you made, and then we can talk about the thing, how to change the thing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So how was it going back to work? How long was your encore?
So it was supposed to, I was going to start my own consulting business. So
Okay.
I've never done that before. I always worked for large companies. So I was going to start my own consulting business. So I figured I don't have much of a network because everyone I knew worked at Fidelity. So I said, well, let me find a company looking for a problem manager and I'll apply for the job. And in the application from LinkedIn, I took a lesson from the Seinfeld episode where George Costanza realizes that he needs to do the opposite of his intuition every time. So, cause it's always been wrong his whole life. So I should do the opposite. So at the end of the application, I said, I really don't want this job. And I went on to explain that, I want to start consulting. So I will join for 6 months. I know what you need to do. I'll hire the people. I'll put the process in place. I'll put the technology in place with ServiceNow, and I'll get you set up. And then after 6 months, I'm done. And I just hit submit and kind of laughed and said, well, I'll never hear from them. And then the next morning they called me back in true Costanza format and said, we really want to talk to you. And so had a discussion. They convinced me to join full time, not to do contracting. And I said, all right, what's the harm? I could do a year. And after a year, I said, what's the harm? I'll do 2 years. I really like it here. And it wound up being 2.5 years. And then I said, that's it. We're moving to Spain. I'm retiring. I'm done. So, it was 2.5 years and it was a great experience. We solved a significant number of major enterprise-wide issues affecting their global clients that people weren't resolving for years. And
Wow.
in matters of minutes, we were knocking these things out.
Wow.
So it's very rewarding.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I would think you'd have the world beating a path to your door. How did you decide to use Scribe what was the journey, from the idea from book to manuscript to publisher? Like I imagine that took a few years. What was the process there?
Yes. So it was just referral. So I was talking to a gentleman who continued on after I took the early voluntary buyout from Fidelity. I was talking with one of my friends who was still at Fidelity, and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, because he knows I'm not one to just go hit golf balls all day. I got to do something. Yeah. So I said, well, a lot of people, I'm sure this probably comes up a lot in your podcast. I had told people the story about my wife so many times, and it would always end with, oh my God, you have to write a book.
Yep.
So when I was leaving Fidelity, my friend said, what are you going to do? I said, well, apparently I have to write a book. So that's what I'm going to do. So he said, and it was kind of half jokingly, and he said, well, he had a friend, I forget the friend's name, unfortunately, but he had a friend who had worked with Scribe, and he said his friend could not speak highly enough about it. You have to check them out. So that was really, I looked into it. I loved everything I saw, had my first meeting, and it went from there. 9 months later, I was published.
No higher compliment, by the way, than a friend telling you, "Oh my God, you should write a book." They're not throwing that around too lightly. That's fantastic. Did you start writing on your own, or did you wait until you had the publishing figured out? Okay, so you just sat down and cranked.
I started. I wrote again. Just by the way my brain works, I can't say I started writing. I started outlining, and really doing an outline of how is this going to look? How is this going to flow? Then when I started to work with Scribe, it kind of, some of the training kicked in. So it kind of all came together right when it had to, because I was ready to start writing. And I think I was doing so much with the outline because I was afraid to start writing that I could spend 2 years working on this outline. I was like, dude, start writing. Enough. Shut up.
Yeah.
Start writing.
It's so much less stressful to write bullet points than to write prose. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you had to kind of make that adjustment from your sister to be like, all right, we got to pick a path here, whether it's memoir or instruction with, some personal anecdotes. From that frame of mind, and how long was that process between when you maybe wrote the first sentence of your outline and published your book?
So it was published 9 months after I retired from Fidelity. So it was probably only about 7 months to actually start writing. It was kind of 1 month, I'm not doing anything. 1 month, I'm going to, start outlining this.
Wow.
At the end of that, started to connect with Scribe, and then it was 7 months and done.
Yeah, that's a quick path. You're as advertised, an effective man. Thinking of that time period, do you have advice for people who are in that position right now, who are kind of like, man, people keep telling me I should write a book. I don't really know where to start. Seems like an intimidating mountain to climb. How do you solve that problem?
I would, I can only speak to what worked for me, but I would recommend really to anyone else is if you haven't done it before, sitting down to write a book is the analogy I use. It's kind of like someone walking into your kitchen with one of these Super Bowl 6-foot long heroes or hoagies, depending on where you're from. And you can look at that and go, oh my God, I can't eat that whole thing. And
I'm not afraid of it. I can eat a 6-foot hoagie. Yeah, I'm like, just turn the lights off. Leave me alone with this thing. I'll take care of it right now.
You have to come. All right, first, we need a methodology here. We're going to cut it into pieces. We might have to invite some people over. And that's really, kind of don't get overwhelmed thinking about writing the book. Think about an outline. Think about your team. And, step one in my process is build a team. So, that works for this is, okay, who's your team going to be? Because you don't want it to just be you. If you've ever done it before, it's not going to be just you. Who's your team? I had my sister, some family, Scribe. So, okay, I got my team. My step 2 is educate the team. In this case, the team was educate me. So it was a little different. And then work on, the problem statement is create your problem statement is step 3. In this case, it was the outline. Just take a month, take however long you need the outline, because writing the outline really kind of forces you to go, you keep revisiting and going back, to find things. And it just winds up being a much fuller outline if you give it the time it deserves.
Love it. Fantastic. And then from the outline, once you shifted into writing mode, it just kind of happened. Did you use dictation or tools or anything like that? Did you structure your schedule? What was it like tactically?
No, I pride myself on my typing ability. So I typed it, but my approach was, and I think that Scribe is where I got the advice of something along the lines of 100 words a day should be your target. Don't think you're going to write the book tomorrow. And so I did 2 things that were critical for me. One is I had a definite limitation, no matter where I was in my head. I had a definite limitation on roughly about 100 words. I think it was 100 words per day.
It might be 1,000. Might be 1,000.
Maybe it was 1,000. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. So 1,000 words a day. Definitely 1,000. Sorry. So after 1,000, I would stop. But then the next key thing was and I don't know if this is for many people, but every day when I started from the beginning of chapter 1 and read all the way up to where I was. And by the time I got to where I last left off, my hands were the keyboard was smoking. And next thing I knew, I was done with 1,000 words, and it was only, an hour and a half or 2 hours later. And I tried that one day and it worked. And literally I did that for 7 months and then I was done.
Wow. Interesting. That's a great technique. I love that. I hope we taught that to you. I don't remember if we did or not, but I love that technique and I'm going to tell other people about it.
Thanks. I've read the book a painful number of times now.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's, I think there's somewhere where you can tell when some authors haven't really read their own book. And there's some authors I talk to that they go to read their audiobook and they're like, oh my God, I'm catching all these mistakes. It's why we recommend everybody do a read out loud edit, because when you slow down and when you read it out loud, you force yourself to articulate each word. You really evaluate each word through a new lens where your eyes just like skim over it, especially on a computer. If you've never printed it out, you'll catch more things. And then if you're reading it, you'll catch more things, but it's just, a matter of reps. So you got to read the thing a lot of times, a surprising number of times. Jim, this has been amazing. I feel like I could interrogate you for hours and keep unpacking this. I want to hear all the stories. I want to osmosis your life's experience into my head so that I become a better problem solver. But I suppose that's what the book is for. So I'm going to go buy the book and read it and try to become a better person. I appreciate you very much. Where should people follow you, check you out, attempt to unretire you again? Anywhere you'd send people other than the book, of course, which is Solved in 7, The Power of Disciplined Problem Solving.
Yeah. So thank you for sending people there. And the easiest way to contact me at this point is just solved in 7, with the number 7, not the word, solved in 7 at gmail.com. And I get any notifications from there immediately, and I usually respond within hours.
Okay. Solved in 7 at gmail.com. Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to write this book and to talk with us today. And I look forward to bringing you a success story of applying your method in the years to come.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to go finish reading the Book of Elon now.